إذا أردت عيشة طيبة مباركة هنيئة فأحسن إلى خلق، أحسن إلى عباد الله، أحسن إلى مسلمهم وكافرهم بالحسنى، حتى إلى المخلوقات الأخرى. البغي الزانية من بني إسرائيل سقت كلبا فشكر الله لها فغفر لها. رجل مر بطريق فيه غصن شوك، قال والله لأنحين هذا، لا يؤذي المسلمين، خايف أن يؤذي المسلمين. ونحن الآن الواحد منا يتعمد أكرمكم الله يرمي الزبالة في طريق الناس حتى يؤذيهم، هذا يقول والله لأرفعن هذا عن الطريق لا يؤذي المسلمين، فأدخله الله الجنة، شكر الله له فغفر له. علينا أن نكون من أهل الإحسان، لأن ربنا تبارك وتعالى يقول وأحسنوا إن الله يحب المحسنين.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. This noble sheikh really gave us some educational insights on, how do you get a happy, blessed, and pleasant life. And I have some notes here that I wanted to share with you from that clip. And he talked about how you need to be good to creation. So creation includes animals, believers, and disbelievers. Now, when it comes to animals, there's a lot of work to be done, especially in terms of people who use animals to pull carriages, to carry tourists. When you see a lot of these animals, they are heavily malnourished, have a lot of bruising, and are not treated very well. And more people are filming the bodies of these animals, and they're not treated kindly. Further, in a lot of animal shelters, they are becoming overwhelmed. People get these dogs, and then these places struggle to afford to upkeep all these dogs, so they get euthanized. You look at factory farms, pretty dark, very dark. And we have to think of giving justice to ecosystems where we realize we share this planet with other creatures and we have to give them their rights. Think about, for example, a lawn, Bermuda grass. It's barren. We're literally wasting water watering those. It would be better to have gravel or natural grasses that are drought resistant, cactuses, succulents, native plants that are used to the climate, non-invasive species. This would be preferable, and people should grow food instead of lawns. People would be able to trade food within the community and learn to pickle and preserve things more effectively. And also growing tea herbs, medicinal herbs, and seasonings, oregano, parsley, marjoram, all those wonderful things with their little gardens. And this would be great. For example, you could grow a sesame seed plant. Instead of buying it, one little jar of organic sesame seeds was $11 in the store. If you don't want pesticide-ridden sesame seeds. Wow, it's absolutely horrible, some of these prices of seasonings. So if we are able to grow food, we help pollinators, and then we help all the birds and lizards and whatnot that eat those bugs. And it's like this cycle of life, the food chain, everything is all connected. Planting more trees creates shade for us and home for birds and everything else. You have some homeowners associations and bad neighbors and just people who are not into the environment who just create barren landscapes. There was a development that was being redesigned close to me, and they put in fake grass, that plastic crap. And you're like, is it really that bad just to put stones or to let the native grasses grow? Why do you need to put in literally plastic? Like, think of all the chemicals that went in to make that crap, and how ugly it looks, and how it's not biodegradable. Absolutely bizarre. And it was a small patch, and it's like, you really want to not pay a landscaper to at least trim it down? When it overgrows, you could have planted wildflowers. You could have just done something else. Put lava rocks. You know, there's a lot of possibilities, but instead they put something that doesn't help wildlife, is ugly, and doesn't add beauty to the world. And so, to be good to creation, I often think about even the most little. I mean, think about the ants in the Quran. The surah named after a bee. It's something to think about deeply. And think about further the oceans, how heavily polluted they are becoming, and yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us get food from there, and we ourselves are not doing right by those critters. And when you look at the Mariana Trench, so deep, and then you look at some of these other places that are also deep, and there's still plastic and garbage and pollution. You think about these navies, they just leave these vessels in the water, and you're like, that's quite a lot of pollution. Nuclear power, Fukushima. I believe it's called their Fukushima plant. Dumping all those chemicals into the ocean, oil spills, all of it. You're like, what is going on here? We have a lot of work to do, and we're not being very responsible stewards of the planet. Further, there's also a problem with people dumping in places they shouldn't. My community is starting to get a little bit worse. They put up signs, cameras, no dumping, fines, and suddenly you'll see someone just ditch a desk, a couch, a bed, and, random things, and you're like, there's literally a dump processing in our community, but you have to pay for it. So these people, instead of, you have money to buy a new mattress, right? You should factor in the price of paying the fee to process your mattress, instead of dumping it in the street and expecting others to deal with it. And I was trying to push my stroller, and then there's all this stuff that's dumped, and you're like, if you don't have money to pay for your stuff to be taken with a junk removal service, you don't have money then for a new mattress. Okay? And some of these mattresses, they collect bed bugs, and it's very disgusting looking, stained, and you're like, you guys are gross. You can pay a junk removal service, and then they'll process it, take it literally from your home. It's like 1-800 junk removal. I've used them before. Great people, strong, able-bodied men will come and take the stuff that you asked to be taken away. There's also amigos you can just go by, well, maybe not because of the ICE raids, but they used to stand by Home Depot and different places, and all you had to do was pull up and say, how much do you charge per hour? This is the job, the amigos, and they'll get in your truck, and you just, they'll haul it for you. Or they'll lift it for you if you don't want to lift it. There's tons of services, and then there's also smaller individual entrepreneurs who have their own hauling and dumping services, and I'm sure you can find a price that works. So these people, instead of doing something ethical, getting rid of their own rubbish, they dump it and then block the sidewalks, the corners, and they make things more ugly. And it's something to think about, how we have to do better with pollution, waste removal, and we are failing in that regard. How can we have a pleasant life when we put garbage everywhere that literally encourages pests and whatnot? And then instead of becoming more ethical and cleaner, we just spray poison pesticides on it, which gives the people cancer and gets in the waterways and pollutes the water bodies even further. It's all connected. It's all connected. I really also have been going down the rabbit hole of different factory farming practices and the slaughterhouses, and you'd be surprised how dystopian some of those industrialized places are, and you wouldn't want to switch places with those animals. And then you contrast that to someone who raises their own livestock and they live a great life until the day comes that they are to be, become food for the family. And you can see the contrast of ethical animal husbandry and livestock raising, poultry farming, all that stuff. Then you go deeper and you see the animal testing for cosmetics. Rabbits, how they're treated, the mice. And then for certain medical research, they test on those beagle dogs. And you see the lives. When you see the leaked footage, I've been watching it, I couldn't imagine being one of those dogs just day in and day out. You're always being poked and prodded at, and they don't have a very loving existence. It's a very plain, unloving environment, and beagles are so docile and so gentle and so loving, and then look what humans are doing to them. Then you look at how the monkeys were treated for Elon Musk's Neuralink research, and the way those monkeys look at the scientists, your heart breaks. It's tragic. Then you go deeper in circuses and you see how these people beat on the elephants, beat on the lions. You look further into dilapidated zoos where it's just pure concrete and there's just a lion stuffed in there staring at the wall, and you're like, that's torturous. We will be held accountable for how we treated the creation from so many different levels. In, I believe, Argentina, there was an orca in this terrible habitat, this small little pool, and alone. I couldn't imagine just that type of existence. No plants, no other fish, just stuck in a tank and humans staring at you. A tortured existence. Then you look at the horse carriages in New York City, where the horses are also mistreated. So it's not just like in Egypt where they're whipping the hell out of a donkey and some animal because that's the only thing they can do, and they're just oppressing the camels to carry a fat American tourist to go see the pyramids. It's also much deeper in like these horses in the cities hearing honks and being whipped and flogged. It's terrible, and I think it's about time to ban those horse carriages. There's a lot of work we have to do. And maybe a lot of the misery that exists in our world is a form of retribution by our own accord. Think about how salmon is delicious, but it's so filled with many parasites oftentimes. And it's almost like the animals get their payback in a way. And when you see how, like, remember that hadith that talks about that lady who starved her cat to death, and she's going to be sent to hell, is in hell or is going to be sent to hell. I forget how that works, but she's condemned. And I think about that hadith when I watch videos of people who rescue stray dogs that were dumped, or just animals in general. And I saw a video today where a dog had an infected leg and was literally skin and bones, and the owner is well-fed, white guy with long hair, and you look at him and you think, I would not have suspected him of being someone who would be capable of treating an animal in that way and not having any compassion. And then you look at the darkness of women who are paid to harm animals. And there was this marmot creature. They're really funny. They look like giant hamsters. We call them marmots. I don't remember their official name. They stand on their hind legs and look like almost like beavers too. And this lady was like really being mean to it, this Asian woman. And then you discover there's a whole genre of men paying for such activities. I recall reading a news report where an orangutan was being R-worded by male humans. I mean, it's atrocious just what people do to animals of all levels. Whether it's their pet, entertainment, you're like, we have done a great injustice. And so, as believers, we really do have to remember that we're going to be held accountable, and that we are to forbid evil and enjoin the good. And part of that means not turning a blind eye when we see something being done terribly to critters, right? For example, you see cockroaches, you put the chemicals, you get rid of them, right? But that doesn't mean that then you let your kids catch certain bugs and slowly pull them apart. You see what I'm saying? You acknowledge that some have to be removed in an ethical manner, but you don't relish in catching a monarch butterfly and then pulling its wings off. You see what I'm saying? The responsibility of toughness towards pests, and then knowing the limits. Like, for example, I was coming up the stairs, my kids saw a spider outside, and they wanted me to smush it, and I'm like, well, it's outside, so they're free. Once they're inside, that's a whole different ball game. Maybe in Australia, they let these giant huntsman spiders, or whatever they're called, and tarantulas, or whatever, hang about. That ain't me. No, not doing it. Okay? But if they're outside, no problem. Inside, shmushity. Okay? But you can teach that type of respect. We have a lot of work to do, and how can we expect ourselves to have a good, blessed life if we're not good to other creatures? And we're all gonna fail in some regard, you know? That's where we have to have rugged introspection. Where did we fail? How did we fail? And I look in the past and I think, man, I should have played with this dog more, or I shouldn't have bought this dog until I had a bigger place to live, or where I had a different work schedule. If people really began to sit down and think, okay, do I have enough time for this animal? Then a lot less dogs would be in shelters. And also, I made a video about you should have to have a license to have a dog, because it's too easy to get these animals. Then they get dumped and euthanized, and it's a sad cycle of existence. And if you made pet ownership more cumbersome, it would help people be less impulsive. Because when it's super easy to get an animal, then there's not a reverence and respect for it. Think about it. You gotta go through more loopholes to get a car than an animal. And an animal's a living being. And I truly, as well, think that certain animals should not be sold as pets anymore. Rats, mice, rodents, pretty much guinea pigs, because very few people treat them well. I had a huge cage for my piggies, and now that I've had them, I realize they're an outside pet, and they belong outside like rabbits, or like you could say like chickens in a chicken coop. That's how piggies should live. And they need to have like a flock, like a little herd, like a little pack. And that's what they deserve. I saw a reel where a person had a very small cage for their piggy. They didn't clean it, so there's droppings in it, and it's just pacing back and forth. And they sell these very small cages, and then people think it's okay, and they forget that's a living being. And also, when I had my one pet rat, he died early. Petco and PetSmart, they don't sell healthy animals. And I was like, what the heck? But his name was El Gordo Zorro, after the Mask of Zorro, because he had like a white little spot on his chest. But my other rat, he was really intelligent. His name was Bilbo Baggins. And I'd give him a cereal box that was empty, and he would break it down and make a little home with it, and I was like, whoa. So I got to really see Rat's intelligence. But he was not very friendly, and trying to wash him was total nightmare. And I was like, okay, I shouldn't have bought a rat, because this is too hard to train him. And he obviously didn't grow up very well, and he's not socialized, and this was a bad investment. And I bought these thick gloves so that he couldn't bite through them, but rats are very strong. And I just felt really bad trying to corner him with these long black gloves on, these bite-proof gloves, so that I could try to wash him. And it was like, not that he was dirty, but some people don't even think to wash their pets. I'd wash my piggies and they were fine. It was great. They'd be all fluffy and clean. But, subhanAllah, that's when I said, yeah, no, I should have done more research about rats, and honestly, rats shouldn't be pets at all. There's a reason why they don't belong in our homes, and, for example, I was watching a video on Palestine. The mice and the rats were biting the children's faces and whatnot because they live by the dump. There's no sanitation anymore in Palestine, and I thought about, yeah, rats and mice are pests. They're cute, and we watch Disney cartoons, but if you have to live with them, they eat your food, and then they bite you during the night, and they make noises that keep you up at night. And that's why owls, snakes, and cats are important, because they eat those critters. And once they become too numerous, I know there's a rat temple in India, and rats are seen as special in Hinduism. Ganesh, the elephant-headed deity of them, has a little rat buddy, but they don't belong in homes. So a lot of stuff is education, learning the long way, and when we be good to creation, we have to acknowledge our shortcomings. Like, I don't think hamsters should be pets either. They live in a tiny cage, and even though when I was a kid, my hamsters had those tubes and stuff, and like I tried to really just shower them with love, and I actually liked hearing them go on the wheel at night. Actually helped me fall asleep, and you'd be surprised what you get used to. But no, not anymore. And if you think about the betta fish they sell in those tiny cups, they fight when they have another mate, and then people always buy a very small tank, and they're in there, and you're like, that's absolute hell. And so, more and more now, I'm like, yeah, that's not a good idea to have certain creatures if you can't do justice by them, right? So, hopefully we can start to see the connection. Some people get really mad when you point out, like, hey, you need to do better with this area or that area. And I remember when I had a pit bull puppy, his name was Octavius, and he got fleas, and it was hard to get rid of the fleas. But I was like, yeah, this is hard, and I'm at work, and this is not a good idea. Not a good idea. You gotta look at your life and see, like, can you do justice by this animal? And if they don't have enough space to roam, that's why having dogs in apartments is also really bad, even if they're a small dog. And also, you need to have a dog walker. It's great. In our community, I see these guys, they walk these dogs in big groups, and I think that's awesome. Because if you don't got time, you need to pay somebody. You need to have money to pay somebody to walk your dog. And when you get a dog, you need to think about veterinarian bills. And you need to understand the problems that come with ticks and fleas. When they're sick, when they destroy stuff, you need to have patience. And, you know, they love to bite and chew, and you need to educate yourself on them. And that requires maturity. So all this comes in to how we are ourselves, our ability to see where our weak points are, and then understanding that if you want a good life, you need to bless others in ways where You bring peace, stability, security, and happiness. And you are pleasant to be around, and you create a pleasant environment. And you want others to feel pleasant and blessed as well. And you acknowledge what you fail at and where you need to do better, and that you're not perfect. Too many injustices going around. And we can't get overwhelmed and think that because others have it worse, we just gotta quit and throw in the towel. We should never stop finding ways to make things better. And every little action does add up. And you can inspire someone without even realizing it. That's important too. Some people can be doing something so good that you're like, hey, that's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. For example, I recall seeing a whistleblower. They were showing the hooves of the dairy cows, how they're standing on concrete. They live in these factory farm dairy cows, and they was all messed up, this cow's hooves, bloody, infected. And you're like, how is that even legal? But you see these corporations, what they do to the animals, and the workers, they're pretty much told to not care, and they need to feed their families, so they decompartmentalize their personality and their humanity. And you contrast that with thinking about how the Prophet, peace be upon him, was gentle with animals, and how so many of the prophets, like, they're around animals. You have to have gentleness with them as well. You begin to see how animal ethics are extremely important. He gave us them as food, but that doesn't mean we then treat them terribly. How can we be blessed if we engage in actions that are reprehensible? It's something to really examine, truly. And how do you raise kids to want to do that? There's a lot of work to be done. And sometimes we have to see, like, okay, we did something good and it didn't get reciprocated by that person, but we have to not become bitter and frazzled and have a chip on our shoulder. We have to be able to be like, yeah, we did a good deed. We didn't get back what we expected, but Allah is swift in accounting, and that'll be something for us on Judgment Day. Because some people, they'll do a good deed, it doesn't get appreciated, it goes south, and then they're like, you know what, I might as well just not do it anymore. So we can't get jaded like that. I have to keep doing good. And some people can get their heart broken because they help somebody and then they were let down. They help somebody and then they're let down. But then maybe you can just switch your charitable acts to creatures. I was thinking about that a lot lately. There's so many animals that need help. Elderly, little children. We have to keep that charitable heart and not forget. And there'll be opportunities, inshallah, presented to us where we have to do something pleasant and to help the creation. Whether it's an insect, an animal, a fellow human, or the environment. Imagine a property owner who says, you know what, I'm gonna plant more trees, and I'm gonna let there be the natural grasses, and I'm gonna get local native wildflowers to do in this property instead of fake grass or crabgrass, Bermuda grass that drinks up all the water. Imagine somebody who's able to control the homeowners associations and says, you know what, we're gonna open it up and let homes. It's no longer, we're not gonna go around and say your grass has to be this tall and you have to have a lawn. But we're going to start letting people build their fences and put what they want in their front yard, as long as it's not like a garbage dump. Right? But let them grow food. What if, like, imagine a governor who's like, we're going to put cactuses like prickly pears and saguaros that are beautiful, and we're gonna make those barren, dry hill dust bowl stuff. We're gonna put some natural, agaves in there, aloe veras, and we're going to make it nice, and we're going to beautify the environment because that creates peace. And also, a lot of those plants bloom, and that'll help the pollinators, the bees, the butterfly migration, or something like that. And we're gonna start to be more friendly towards that. Or imagine just encouraging children to clean up garbage in their environment and having field trips where high schoolers are able to get bags and go clean up garbage. When I was in the honor society, we did that. But that was to earn points to get it on your transcript. You have to do certain points to order to get the seal of the honor society on your transcripts. It's not good enough just to qualify for grades, but you have to do activities. So we would clean up garbage. That was one of them. But imagine if you started talking about helping the environment from a young age, like to these children, and then physically making high schoolers, because I walked where some high school was. The amount of garbage these teens just open the door and leave on the ground was shocking. And before someone says, oh, they're probably immigrant kids, no, this was a white area, and this was a pretty prep school, and it was a private school, and I was pissed off because they just dumped their trash on the ground. And why isn't the city, they know all the teens hang out there, they park there, why aren't they putting trash cans? Hello. And I just been noticing more and more dumping. And so the mayors and the governors, they all gotta come together and figure out cleaning up the garbage, talking about the environment. But remember, the right wing, they love hunting conservation, but then when you get into pollution, all of a sudden they turn off. And then you have the lefties who are like, we love clean oceans, but we hate hunters. And you're like, okay, we got to find a way to bridge the gap, because our environment is so essential that we're going to end up being in a very barren landscape, as if we were living on Mars, because every tree's been cut down. Even I had this idea, concrete, or just like some type of hard mineral or sculpting mineral. Imagine creating trees, like sculpting beautiful trees to create shade that don't need water. I mean, imagine that. Or creating these types of, like on the sidewalks, creating some type of brutalistic architecture to create like it could be an arch, it could be a square, but like a hallway. I don't know what you would call that. And you know where you walk on the sidewalk and something's above you, and having some of those jasmine plants or those creeping vines to create shade as you like make it safe, make there be gaps. Some are like pillars, like every 6 feet, so that people can see. You don't want it to be a closed hallway, because then you get criminals living in those, and if there's a crime in the middle of it, no one can see to help. But just having classy coverage, arched stuff to create shade so people can walk, beautifying the environment. But imagine if cities sculpted, instead of doing humanoid statues, sculpt a tree all the way down to its leaves, to where as the closer you get, you're like, wow, somebody sculpted this tree? That's amazing. Making it look realistic. It could be out of marble, could be out of concrete, whatever it is, right? But employing the artists to make these tree statues around and then make it create shade. You wouldn't need water. There's a lot you could do. So much you could do, rather. But we have to be able to create justice and make life blessed for others, pleasant for others, and to serve. Not just to expect, but to serve in many capacities. There's so much to be done. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and join the blog.